Okay, just another minute. This is great. I see there are more questions, which is great. Okay, you wanna just wrap up your thoughts and writing, and then we can move on. Okay, so next, I'm gonna stop sharing this. And through the duration of the PD, you'll still have access to this document. So if you have more ideas that you wanna insert, feel free. All right, so now I'm going to share with you, I'll try to be really quick with this, but this is, I realize some of the ARP folk have just joined ARP and have probably just seen one Convergence exhibition. So I'm going to show you a few examples. Okay. Okay, so this is basically an overview of exhibition practice in CAPE in-school programs, CAPE programs, really. So we do work with our partners, or we work with you to figure out how to use exhibition practice in the classroom, right? As part of your teaching. So how to create artworks where students are actively involved in making objects, artifacts, product that could be assembled to tell a narrative, right? So they are things that are in relation to another, and they're in relation to the room. So oftentimes your classes create installations, use the classroom as an installation space. So this is like a mural that's that wraps around the walls of the school that students are making, that is about ecosystems, right? Sky, land, and water, and plants, and animals that live in those habitats and their relation to each other. And then, actually, oops, sorry. This is another project. I think John Neff just entered the room. This is from class at Ravenswood. They do a curation project every year. This is one of their curation challenge where students brought together objects and things that they made to curate a mini curation at their desk. And this is them presenting projects in the classroom to different classes. This is Daly Elementary School, where at the end of each year they do what looks like a science fair, but they are sharing their work and writing about the projects that they worked on to other classrooms. Here are same students creating actually students that are presenting their installation to other students. Okay. Detail of that, something, object hanging from the ceiling. I just wanted to show this real quick. This wasn't at a school, this was at the Japanese American Service Committee, where students actually created work about the Japanese American internment and their relocation to Chicago. And the Japanese American Service Committee was that site that helped Japanese Americans relocate to Chicago. And so through talking with elders and looking at archives from the Japanese American Service Committee, the students created this like site-specific installation in the space, right? So another way that students use space. Let me go real fast, more exhibits. And then Convergence, this is an early Convergence exhibit where you see like all the work is buttered up next to each other. And this was at a gallery space in the Ravenswood area. And you could see that each school took up about like a 4-foot wide section of a wall. And then from floor to ceiling, installed their works. And it's kind of a little hard to decipher like where projects end when they start. Right? But they did use the whole space. I mean, visually it was like stunning and encapsulating. But I think, but at times it was hard to understand like which projects were in of themselves as projects, and like also there wasn't necessarily like a dialogue between different projects. Here are another space at Chicago State University down in the south side, and teachers and artists installing their works at the space. And this is the end of the year exhibit again. And they're also they're translating some of the work that they had their students do in their classrooms into this space, right? So they are, here they're using the windows for the viewers to look outside and identify shapes and objects on the campus, things that their students were doing to understand space and shapes in their environment. It's another view of that exhibition. And then we started to do these exhibitions in galleries again. This is at Chicago Artists Coalition in their old like Fulton market space. And this was not at the end of the school year, but took place in the fall. So a lot of the work was, because we had to follow gallery schedules. So we couldn't do end of the year exhibits at this point. So what we did was we collected all the artwork at the end of the school year Program staff spent the summer curating the works and preparing the works for exhibit. Most of it was in communication with with the class teams, sending images back and forth, getting more feedback, and then the exhibition was installed in the fall. Right. This is the great space, and we went back to end of the year exhibitions, and this is where we really kind of picked up steam on collective curation, where the teachers and artists actually organize their projects and the space to create one whole curated exhibition. Right. And then we do use the Convergence for other purposes to continue dialogue. And this is an image of teachers, Margie Stover or teaching artist Margie Stover and Patty Wethouse, engineer teacher, leading a workshop, right? Presentation and workshop at the Bridgeport Art Center. At a Convergence at the Bridgeport Art Center. There's teachers discussing a project that they created, right? In response to Patty and Margie's presentation. And then this was a symposium at the Great Space, at the Convergence at the Great Space. And this is our some teachers and artists from our special education teams, right? And then we also partnered with Borderless Studio on this all-day symposium on arts and education. Okay, so that just gives you a quick overview of Convergence and where we left off, and now we're kind of figure out like where we're headed. So, Kate, do you want to say a few words about Acre and introduce?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Kate. I'm the director of Acre. Acre stands for Artist Cooperative Residency and Exhibitions, which will help you just kind of, that's sort of it. But it's Acre's an artist-led artist residency program, artist residency and exhibitions program that takes place in Steuben, Wisconsin and Chicago. So every year we have around, well, not this year, but every year we have around 80 artists who come through Steuben to kind of make work, and we have 7 different departments. I'm actually up here right now to make work, to work together. It's a really collaborative residency. We also then, everyone who's ever been to the residency is invited back to be staff. So the residency is staffed by artists and makers of all kinds. And then in the year following your time with us at the farm, we have a curatorial fellowship program. We're like 6 or 7 curatorial fellows who work with us to put on, and about 11 partner gallery spaces, independent spaces in the city of Chicago and kind of around the country to put on exhibitions in the year following your residency.
Are you frozen?
Did I freeze?
Yeah, you're frozen, sorry.
Am I back? Am I back? What's the last thing we heard? I'm gonna make it quick. Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna make it quicker in case that happens again. But basically, the whole program, our model is really meant to create these kind of like large webs of support. It's a really national organization. Our artists, our residents come from all over the country and the world at this point. And so, you know, what we want to be able to do is kind of create the connections that we need to sustain our practices for our lifetimes. So and keeping people involved, so it's not just a program that you kind of like work into and then work out of. The idea is to sort of constantly be like finding ways to work together, finding ways to support each other. So am I still frozen? Or we're good? So there's today I'm like really pleased to have with us three of our artists and curators who worked with our curatorial fellowship, and then actually have worked with our organization in other ways, and hopefully we'll all get to keep working together. So we have Josh Rios, Gee Wesley, and Lauren Leving. And all three of these wonderful people are curators and artists. They've worked in, you know, small independent DIY projects and large institutions. So there's a wealth of experience here to sort of share in terms of ways to sort of collaborate with your artists, but also ideas for how we might go about, you know, sharing some of the things that we know. I'm going to let them maybe introduce themselves a little bit further, but I think given that, you know, I think all three of you guys are interested also in ways in which like the exhibition kind of touches community, or like is a part of other things than just hanging works on the walls. So that's a kind of a not a great introduction, but yeah, I'm excited to be working with all of you. And in lieu of continuing to freeze, I'm going to maybe turn that over. Is there anything else I can share? We've been working with CAPE for another project, and that's been really nice. And I really love this program, so I'm excited for us to be collaborating with you all to think through how to do this, and what ways we can yeah, be good thinking buddies as we sort of make your exhibitions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Gee, I just made you host. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kate, for that wonderful introduction, and Mark for being invited here, and to everyone for joining. But before I go into presentation mode, I'm just going to share a bunch of links that pertain to images that I'll show in my presentation, and you don't have to look at them now or at all, but just so you have them in case you're curious. Great, so I guess I can start sharing my screen. And I apologize, my presentation is slightly over 10 minutes long, but hopefully there's enough time. Oh, sorry. Saying I have to. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? Cool. Great, so I guess I can just start. So this slideshow that I'm going to share includes kind of like two types of online projects. The first will be examples of online curated projects that have gone public since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The second group of slides I'll present include the works of 5 contemporary artists, all made using the internet and for internet publics. So these are those will be artworks. I'll also say 2 things about those artist projects that I'll share. One is that they all make use of internet platforms that were kind of widely available and used to the general public. And 2, that they were all made before the pandemic. So together these works kind of track a trajectory of how artists have considered the relationship between art and online viewership. I think the earliest one is from 2009 and the latest is from 2019. And what connects the online exhibition projects that I'll share to the online artworks that I'll share is that they pose questions about the relationship between our online selves and our offline selves. And for that reason, I've called this presentation, I'm Not Here, to sort of underline the fascinating contradictions of selfhood, of presence, of agency that apply to how we are seen and how we see online. So since the beginning of the shutdown, there's been an unprecedented rise of online curatorial projects. These projects have included online exhibitions, film festivals, viewing rooms, multimedia, web platforms, many, many more things. And they've been produced by various sources. So artists, collectives, commercial galleries, museum institutions, other cultural actors. But of course, there's no standard definition of what an online exhibition should look like or what it does look like. So take, for example, this kind of Baltimore Museum of Art project, Salon, which BMA invited a number of Baltimore-based galleries and collectives to curate digital exhibitions. The project is a way of redistributing visibility to these Baltimore-based project spaces at a time when they and all art institutions were closed to the public. However, for the most part, these exhibitions comprise of discrete images, captions, and a short text from each kind of Baltimore-based gallery project. And generally absent are the robust types of interpretive materials that typically accompany an exhibition, and the types of like nonlinear types of adjacency that is offered through in-person viewership. So also proliferating the internet have been kind of commercial gallery viewing rooms, such as this one by Hauser and Wirth. Many online exhibitions such as this were translations of in-person projects that elected to shift formats when physical spaces became unavailable, utilizing kind of complex technologies of 360-degree camera footage and computer rendered interiors. Similarly, Google's arts and culture platform has allowed sort of dozens of institutions that are closed to be kind of, that are physically closed to publics to kind of be virtually visible and navigable by various culture seekers. So that's also in the group of links that I sent. You can kind of explore the Guggenheim and MASP in Sao Paulo. Check out this great Linda Bobardi installation layout. So I think it's helpful to examine this trajectory of online viewership by looking back to a broader lineage of recent online art production as a way of examining what they suggest about seeing and being seen online. So the following slides, I'll share a few case studies of artists who are exemplary, I think, of a range of tendencies in contemporary internet art over the last 10 years. So this is amazing work by Chris Marker. It's from 2010, and it addresses, I think, a number of tendencies in internet art from that time and prior. So it's Chris Marker is a filmmaker who was born in 1921. This work was completed 2 years before Marker's death, where he died in 2012. So this video artwork features Marker's avatar, an orange cat named Guillaume, who leads us through a tour of a museum that Marker has built in the online simulation Second Life. So for those who are unaware, Second Life was launched in 2003. And it was really the first popular user-created 3D social media platform that allowed millions of users to kind of inhabit this parallel lives in a virtual world. So in Marker's computer-generated museum, the galleries are filled with images and videos culled from his oeuvre as a filmmaker. Oeuvre, the movie, explores one of the internet's oldest conventions, right? So specifically the utopian possibilities of world making. But it also hinges on one of the common internet tropes that kind of come up in some of the other artist projects I'll share, which is the avatar, right? So embedded in the logic of the avatar is this promise that the user can explore a virtual world unencumbered by the limitations and realities of their offline identities, whether that's race or gender or sexuality or geography or class. So this idea of like, I'm not here, that I'm sort of carrying throughout these slides, speaks to this dual presence and absence that's embedded in the avatar. So through the avatar, the user is kind of technologically present, but they're also shrouded in this kind of anonymity and physical absence. So this work in particular by Marker is also kind of typical of another of internet art's penchants, which is mobilizing existing web-based platforms to new ends. So this is a convention, of the use of ready-made technologies also kind of calls into question the blurry limits of authorship that's in play in internet culture broadly and internet communication broadly. So that kind of leads into a work that you might be familiar with that's also included in the link. If you play it, which is great, but it's kind of one note, pun intended, is a highly canonized internet artwork by Corey Archangel. If you play it, maybe keep your volume on mute. So like the previous work by Marker, it too makes use of an existing media platform, in this case, YouTube. But Archangel's kind of 2009 video piece is a recreation of Arnold Schoenberg's 1909 work, 3 piano pieces made by editing together videos of cats playing pianos downloaded from YouTube, reconstructing the audio to recreate this score. So in the case of this work by Archangel, so I'm not there, or this concept that I'm thinking about reflects a kind of conceptual relinquishing of artistic agency, in the sense that the artist's hand, his creative voice is relatively absent, right? Like Archangel's role in the authorship of the work recedes a bit, and his only creative operations are really these like two intercepting gestures of appropriation. One, the appropriation of pre-existing cat videos from the internet, and then the other, this kind of like appropriation of Schoenberg's masterpiece. Archangel's generation of net artists who were kind of working from like the late 90s to around this time period in the kind of early aughts is often embraced the internet for its like kind of techno-utopian free play of art production, favoring collaborative authorship and the recirculation of media through Web 2.0 platforms like YouTube and other forms of user-generated content. But this kind of reflects an idea of the internet as a frontier, and I mean that in all of its kind of complex entanglements, so in which one can sort of find these naturally produced vernacular forms of culture ready to be seized and remixed and recirculated. And I think that like, I'll jump forward to this slide, but implied in Archangel's work is this notion of circulation and viewership as somehow being neutral acts, right? That when grabs and drops and clicks and posts are kind of these innocent utopian gestures, free of the politics of everyday life. And then maybe similarly in a work like, or the trope of the avatar that's figured in a work like Marker's, is this claim that the presentation of the self online can transcend the boundaries of our lived experience. So this 2014 series by Amalia Ullman offers an interesting twist on that assumption. For several months, Ullman conducted a scripted online performance via her Instagram and Facebook profiles that was entitled "And Excellences in Imperfections." And Ullman underwent an extreme makeover of this, creating this semi-fictionalized personality, went so far as to pretend to have a breast augmentation, posted videos of herself in a hospital gown and a padded bra, and used Photoshop to manipulate her images. So it kind of was thinking about the ways in which the internet becomes this site for the performance of the self online, and the ways in which the internet can kind of create this virtual avatar that exceeds the bounds of the self. But yet in Ullman's deploying of it, she's also thinking about the deeply coded and gendered readings of the body that come with her presentation as this kind of like femme Instagram influencer. And then moving along, the next project I can talk a little bit about is one by E. Jane, who's an artist based in Brooklyn and a current resident at the Studio Museum in Harlem. This is entitled "Alive, #NotDeadYet." So this project asks self-identified Black women and femmes to post selfies to social media using a pastel backdrop designed and adorned with the word "alive," captioned with the #NotDeadYet. So this project began as a response to police brutality, specifically after there was no indictment for the murder of Sandra Bland in 2015. So the project kind of aims to defy the narrative of Black women and femmes as only dead and dying at the hands of police by focusing on women who are still here, still alive, still resisting. Implied in E. Jane's work is kind of reminder that not all forms of internet circulation are entirely innocent. For instance, this kind of recirculation of images of Black death, which can often perpetuate feelings of trauma, but it also points to, of course, like the ways in which like the online presence and the continued online presence of Black individuals can't be separated from our ongoing vulnerabilities offline. Sandra Bland, notably herself, was a frequent YouTube poster and publisher whose channel Sandra Speaks was, of course, cut short by her death and her murder. Maybe I'll just spend like a minute and a half longer. I think I'm over time by about a minute and 15 seconds, but just to quickly cover a couple more artists. So the final two works I'll share are by an artist named American Artist. American Artist's work addresses privacy, surveillance, state control, police violence, and American Artist refers to the types of images that we're looking at here as these kind of dignity images. It's a coinage by this artist, American Artist. It's to describe a kind of a personal image that's deliberately withheld from social media circulation. So with the ubiquity of social media apps, there's now an inherent choice in deciding what not to post, right? Like into digital space. The images not shared with the public eye break free of a performed persona of the self that someone like Ullman maybe alludes to in that kind of earlier work. And the reasons for sharing or not sharing such images vary. But it constitutes maybe like a nonverbal declaration of agency, whether realized or not, in the act of choosing to capture and keep an image outside of social media context and circulation. And so this is like another project by American. So as shown in the previous work by Amelia Ullman, social media enables a level of performativity that impacts how individuals capture their experiences and what they subsequently share to the world. American and that artist I showed earlier, E. Jane, kind of belong to a generation of contemporary artists who want to reject this idea that the problems, concerns, realities, and barriers that define our life and mobility offline are somehow excluded in our online lives. This is kind of an online correspondence with the artist's mother, which American describes the work on the left. And if there's time, I'll just kind of read it really quickly. Hey mom, I saw your comment on my new blue profile photo. I'm doing an art piece about the present state of social media in our lives. Now the feed that we subscribe to dictates our experience to the world. And though a lot of us forget, this representation is not a reality. There are also bigger issues about who is really gaining from the labor we put into sustaining our online selves and whether we really have a choice to refuse to participate in constructing this image. I'm calling the artwork a refusal in reference to an article I read about care work and the stakes of social media refusal. Instead of posting images, as I usually do, each image will be replaced with a blank blue rectangle, an obvious reference to my essay about the shade of blue as the potential to produce an image and can represent the state prior to revolution. Each of these images will be printed out like a regular film photo and archived in a photo album. These will be the only copies of the photos. In order for someone to see the photos, they must actually meet me and see them firsthand from my album. Next time I come to visit, I will definitely bring this album with me. I realize you are one of the few people who will be emotionally affected by my refusal of social media, so let's make sure to keep in touch more often and Skype more often and rely less on distant and removed images from my public feed. Love you, American Artist. So maybe I'll just spend like 20 seconds briefly kind of concluding. In this presentation, the phrase "I'm not here" is used as a kind of impossible disavowal, right? One meant to describe the contradictions of this moment of contemporary art viewership. To say "I'm not here" is to verbally disavow your presence, while performatively implying that you are in fact there still in the place that you're supposedly not speaking from. In the online world of this global pandemic, we commune collectively with each other through our digital presence in ways that are asynchronous and decentralized, through recorded Zoom calls like this one, pre-recorded webinars, gathering online in online forums, behind avatars, user profiles, and machine vision. What the artworks I share demonstrate is that the experience of life online creates a new kind of viewership, and a new kind of viewership maybe demands new phase of thinking about exhibitions. I'm Not Here describes a long history of kind of new media art that includes forms of world building, of aspirational self-presentation, of deferrals of artistic authorship, of technological refusal, and of online ways of affirming life. Like publishing and posting, sharing a project online is a way of making the private public. And it's something that I think shares with exhibition organizing. So I've gone way over time. I really apologize for that, but maybe I'll just wrap up there and thank you all for taking the time to listen to these kind of circuitous musings. I'll stop sharing.
No worries, that was great. Thank you so much. What we'll do is we'll just continue on. That was great, Gee, thank you. I'm gonna reclaim my host. How about Lauren? Would you like to go next? Okay, I'll just make the host.
Am I the? Oh, I'm not the host yet.
I'm trying to locate. There you are.
Also, Gee, don't worry about one. That was amazing and beautiful. And mine is like nowhere near as great as that. And don't worry about going over time because mine might be a little under time. So we are all good here. Cool. So hi, everyone. I am Lauren Leving, and I'm going to try to, there's my presentation, I think. Okay. You can see my screen. It's like the PowerPoint. Is this okay? Can everyone, is that good? Because I want to keep my notes up as well. Does that make sense? Mark?
Yes.
Looks good? Okay. I'm Lauren Leving, and I'm from Chicago, and I have a lot of connections in Chicago, and I'm was an Acre curator. My time ended last year, but still really involved with that. And yeah, the majority of my roots are in Chicago, but I moved to Cleveland about 10 months ago. I started working at the Museum of Contemporary Art here, and I'm the curator of public programs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my philosophy, or like my exhibition practice rooted in programming, and the relationship between programming and accessibility. Yeah, okay. And so I've been thinking a lot about like why we have exhibitions lately, like in the midst of this pandemic, and like I said, I'm this curator of public programs in a museum in Cleveland. But what does this mean when we can't be in the public and we can't be physically together? Like, how can we have programs or exhibitions? And so what do exhibitions look like now? And I've been trying to take like a variety of approaches depending on the goals of the program and being thoughtful about who they're for. So when we first closed down, there was this rush for at least MoCA, and I know a lot of other institutions, to sort of move online and cancel all of these in-person programs, which is a bummer because I've already been working with these artists and supporting them. And so how can one of the goals be like, how can we continue to support artists and what do they need in this moment? And so in MoCA's case, one of the first programs I developed was this 15 Minutes Of series, which is a live art making series that gave artists financial support, but it also gave them access to like our social media platforms. So here's the first slide, cool. So since we're stuck at home, I had plenty of time to research like alternatives to programming and exhibitions. And this program was actually inspired by Fact Magazine's Against the Clock series, which invites a musical artist and DJ to create an original track in under 10 minutes. And so this was like we invited different artists to kind of have these to show their practices on Zoom. And so they would have 15 minutes to create an artwork. So you could see the practice, but also what the work of art, like the finished product, looked like. And then we would post that online. So using our social media, using our social media as this exhibition platform. And so thinking about like for students, this is a really cool opportunity to like show their final artwork, but also provide an opportunity for them to be the teachers, and using social media like as a way to develop like their speaking skills about how they create and talk through their processes to like wider audiences. And so thinking, how are we like kind of pairing this, like social media has like a bit more flexibility, and so it can show how an artist began and then like the end result. And so for the live art making process, we use Zoom and also Facebook Live, but I know that CAPE has posted like discussions on YouTube, which is also a really cool option. And so thinking about like how this type of program can interweave exhibitions and programming components with like the dialogue. And I've been thinking about like how the dialogue of these artists becomes the didactic, or becomes the stand-in for like what the label is. And so based in Cleveland, it's a smaller city than Chicago, but it's still a city, and there are like a lot of parallels. And when I first got here, I was really shocked to learn that in some neighborhoods, the illiteracy rates are as high as 90%, which is was surprising, but also it's not surprising when you think about a lot like just like pipelines and public schools and like yeah. And so I've been thinking how like the discussions are removing the barriers to access of like if you go to a museum and you're uncomfortable or like you are illiterate or don't speak the language that the label is in, like this is kind of like a way to reinterpret the wall label. And I also know that Zoom has like a live captioning feature, and I haven't used the live captioning feature yet, but I've seen it in other programs, and I'm going to begin implementing it with future programs. And that's like also another way to reduce the barrier, to make the program more accessible. And so here is like, this is Morgan, and she's one of our, she was one of Mocha's engagement guides. So this was a really great opportunity for her as well, because she is this, a teaching artist and like one of our front of house team members, but kind of got to marry like her practice of educating Mocha's visitors with like with showcasing her own work. And so this is another example of one of the artists. And if you notice, each one we had like a prompt, and you answer the prompt within the comments, so it acts as like a way to engage the artists with our audiences, and also inspire collecting in ways that people live with this art. And so I don't know if that is like a possibility, but like we would auction this off to, you would enter your comment of like, for this one, it's like, where would you keep this piece in your house? And you would make a comment, and you'd be randomly like entered into a drawing, and then that person is going to, I will deliver the work, I have not yet, but like once I can get to, this person's name is Nolan. So once I can get to Nolan's house to get the terrarium and like package it and deliver it, but it's also inspiring a way for people to live with art. Yeah. Okay. So, and then, oops, well, I'm not there yet, but hold on. So thinking about other ways that we can best use a digital platform to meet the needs of the artist, it's really important to think about like the human contact element of viewing that like we're now missing since we're all stuck at home. And when you teach, like you're talking about art, and like we're talking about the ways that artistic projects develop. And so as a part of this, I became really interested in what studio visits look like, and when we're conducting them online, and how we can prioritize professional development for our artists when showcasing their work. And so Acre and Mocha partnered to do this series called At-Home Studio Visits, which invited artists to apply to have a public studio visit with a friend or with a peer whose artwork they connected with. And it would have been with 2 curators. So in my case, I would have partnered with Kate to conduct a visit. And so Mocha's been in the news lately for censorship and canceling an exhibition because of it, our executive director resigned, which is cool because it means that the museum is working towards change and to be like a better institution. But I also began thinking of like, what does it mean to highlight an artist in a public program? And like, how are we, like, I didn't want any backlash that like Mocha, like well-deserved backlash that Mocha should be having to be like placed on like those artists. That's totally unfair. And like the goal of these programs is to like uplift these artists and showcase their work and like add to like professional skills. And so because of this, the studio visits became private, and so I've been conducting a lot of one-on-one visits with everyone who originally applied, which is super cool because work has changed when you can't get into a studio and you don't have your normal resources because of COVID. And so this background is like a long-winded way of saying that this program has since been modified by our education fellow and developed specifically into a teen program, and she's calling it the Creative Mind series. And so it begins with visits that are private with a curator, which will be me, an educator, my education counterpart, Melissa, the artist, and then a fourth person of the teen's choosing, which can be a peer who's a visual artist or someone in the teen's life with whom they would like to talk about their art. So because the studio visit is likely a new experience for the teen artist, the fourth person is going to help foster a supportive learning environment in which the teen feels more comfortable experimenting and taking risks. So following the studio visit, the Mocha curator and educator are going to coach the artist in writing a statement. And so once a statement is complete, that's kind of going to be posted on our social media along with images of their work. And so it becomes like a different way of creating an exhibition. And so it's merging professional development with this digital exhibition component. And because the proposal process is still in progress, I don't have any images of that yet, but it will look something like these 2 engagements. And I think social media is a super amazing way to highlight work because it's, as far as online platforms, it's like Facebook and Instagram are fairly easy and free to use. And so outside of like what Mocha's been doing, I've been really interested in the Tiger Strikes Asteroids TSA PDF series, which is a series of printable exhibitions. I think it's a really innovative platform because it provides audience members the ability to print out this work and create their own exhibition. So it's closer to the way that we see art in person, but it also encourages people to think about ways that exhibitions can take place in their homes and like different ways of collecting. And so these, this series created by Holly Cahill, it's like the same artwork, but they're in two different spaces, and like one person had a color printer and one person didn't. And so I think that that's really cool of like how we're playing with this exhibition form and ways to live with art. So it's also important to think about access within like digital and analog exhibitions. And so some people can't afford internet, and I like don't have access to like Zoom platforms or anything like that. And I was also going back to like another thing that I was shocked to discover in Cleveland, that even though like we are a mid-sized city and like a city, like an urban area, there's still some places that don't have the infrastructure to get internet access regardless of price. So digital redlining is a major issue. And so we began thinking about what like analog, how we could access analog spaces for exhibitions, and thinking of publications of spaces for exhibitions, kind of going off of this TSA PDF example as well. And so we're in the early stages right now of developing this hybrid zine catalog that highlights MoCA's community of zine makers and provides each artist with their own spread to showcase their work, and that also will include an artist statement. And so in previous years, MoCA, before I arrived, like I said, I've only been here for 10 months, they do this series called Bound, which is MoCA's annual art book and zine fair. And so thinking of like, we have all that acts as an exhibition as a way for artists to showcase their work in person. And so we're adapting that to this program Bound by Mail, which is a zine to introduce people to zines, but it's also acting as this like catalog as another way to support artists. So like you'll have like your own listing and be able to showcase your work. And we're facilitating, it'll have like information it'll have contact information, so you can purchase the zines directly from the zine maker or art book maker without MoCA being like a mediator that takes any attention or profit away from the artist. But I think that this is a really cool way, like if each artist gets their own spread, it's just an analog way of showcasing this exhibition, because we still wanted to highlight artists, but like needed to do it in a socially distant way. And this has been like a very successful program in the past. So how are we like switching that to like an item, like kind of distilling it down into an object as opposed to like a larger exhibition. And I've been thinking about how creating zines or even postcards with work by each artist at the front and the text on the back is an interesting model for an exhibition, because it becomes an affordable way, again, like this raffle that we were doing with the 15 minutes program. It becomes an affordable way for folks to collect art. And there's also this curatorial element and a way to create a story depending on how the postcards are grouped together and disseminated. And in this way, tangible exhibitions are being sent through mail rather than online. So yeah, those are just like some examples aside from like the TSA PDF, which I freaking love that idea. I think it's so brilliant. But this is like, these are some programmatic exhibition hybrids that we've been trying out at MoCA. And I would love your feedback on them and if you wanted to participate. And I'm gonna wrap this up, and I'm just awkward in the way that I'm doing it. So thank you all for having me and inviting me to this. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Lauren, for great ideas, great examples. Now I will reclaim host, and I will pass it to Josh. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or save them until after Josh's presentation. All right, Josh.
Josh, you're muted.
Okay, how about that? Is that better?
Okay.
Okay, and is this okay if as far as views go?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm also gonna try to really be succinct here. I know that there's a lot of information that's being presented and a lot of interesting notions that can be picked from and developed for your own work that y'all need to do. You know, it's kind of like a big menu, and so some things need to be kind of grabbed onto and developed. But my presentation is kind of more about what is exhibition in a way, and I like to, whenever I'm confronted by these kind of concretized forms that are sort of normalized, like then big ones like exhibition or education or whatever, I kind of try to look at them almost like an alien anthropologist and go through and really try to look closely at, wait, what is actually happening here? What are the functions of these institutions or these practices? And of course, we can, as in that mode, you can latch onto a lot of different aspects, but I just picked a few. One thing I made here, I made this expanding mind meme. So you might be familiar with the expanding mind meme, but my expanding mind meme kind of tries to walk through the levels of enlightenment, in quotes, that maybe we can achieve when we think about exhibitions in deeper and deeper and deeper ways and more expansive ways. So on the one hand, you have exhibitions it shows things, you know, that's like clear and pretty obvious. But then if we think about exhibitions as events that are organized around the display of things, we have a little bit more of a nuanced approach. Or if we think exhibitions are events that allow an audience to interact with each other around some ideas that are somehow trapped inside of things that are displayed, we have an even more kind of broad and maybe even more kind of networked idea about what an exhibition is. And the final one, which is very hard to read, it says, exhibitions are events in which an audience interacts with each other, a site, and some ideas in the form of things displayed, and that lives on in the minds of the audience and also potentially in the minds of others who were never even there to begin with. So in that way, it's discursive. So those are the kinds of things I'm trying to think through, like, and hopefully this will be useful for you all to kind of examine, interrogate what is the function of an exhibition, and what, yeah. So this, and I'll walk through a couple of key ideas that I think would help to answer that in some kind of way. So clearly a display. So because CAPE, I think the projects are for the most part completed, although it sounds like some were never able to get off the ground. But if we can just sort of put that aside for 1 second and just kind of assume that most of the projects are pretty much completed, we could definitely greatly reduce our labor and our thinking by simply finding a platform to locate documentation of the completed work alongside whatever contextualization is desired, because there are so many digital platforms to pick from that can house images, links, and text, and that's not a problem, right? You've already used those, and you're already using those. But for me, that leaves a major question, and that's the idea of display. So we just display the things, you know, and that's fine, and that's easy to translate in a way. But that definitely leaves a major question out in the air, which is the question of engagement. So, you know, although an exhibition functions as a way to display things, like a location where objects and projects are assembled or arranged, and that finding these places to do this kind of work will be relatively easy. But I don't think that's the main challenge that's being faced. So for me, I think that if we kind of move through some of these other options of like what an exhibition, how it functions, it's an event on the one hand. So it's more than a location of display. It's an event where an audience moves through space, you know, going this way and then that way, and pausing to reflect here and chatting there, and engaging a student, or breezing by one thing, being focused intently on another, you know, being bored, being interested, you know, like all in different kinds of, in a temporal way, like across time. So in that way, it's kind of an event. And I think this event-like nature is easily lost if we just move, you know, kind of conveniently to a digital platform that displays, you know, documentation and context. So I feel like if there's a way to center this, or like hold it up, you know, and acknowledge it, that would be useful. You know, and clearly there's an exhibition is also about community. So not only does it, you know, exhibit objects and practices. It's a zone of interaction, like where different groups and different individuals who have the event in common, or the idea to be there in common, can talk, exchange, and share ideas about their experiences of the work, of the displays, of the processes. So so in one way, the exhibition is about the maker, right? We made these things, so we're putting them on, or the curator. We saw these interesting people working in this way, and now we want to show them. But really, that is only a half of the equation, right? About what an exhibition is. The other half is the audience, and the way that they are co-authors of the meaning, and also produce a kind of potential for expanded meaning making that they bring to the event of the exhibition through their own communal dialogues, through what they share with artists, or they are present with how they even think outside of this space of the exhibition. So I feel like figuring that out is going to be key if we look at the exhibition in this kind of anthropological sense, the way I'm inviting us to. And clearly, the exhibition is a learning tool. It's a way to provide opportunities to learn about issues, ideas, political positions that people are wanting to explore, and even about oneself. So this happens in the work, in the didactics, and through other engagements that go outside of the exhibition, that exceed the exhibition, like symposiums and discussions. So in this way, they're kind of discursive events, and where contracts are produced and shared, and they're in the way that they add to an ongoing conversation that like exceeds the moment of the exhibition, even the opening, or even when the work is taken down. The learning tool, the aspect of the exhibition, continues to live on in the minds, right, of the people that were there, as they it might have changed their thinking, or they might reflect on it later. But also there's a way that the exhibition lives on in the minds of people that were never there, right? In the way that art historians reflect on historical exhibitions and use them to think and learn with, even though they take place a world away and a whole era away, right? So I think kind of thinking about the long term too is important, even though I know we're trying to solve a kind of short term problem in a way. The last thing I really wanted to kind of focus on, which is the celebratory aspect, which I think is key. And an exhibition is a celebration. It's a celebration of the people who work to produce the exhibition, whether they're the artists, the curators, the administrators, or even I would like to even include the installational kind of work that's required to produce exhibitions. So it's a celebration of all those people, but it's also a celebration of the general public who attends it, and their shared kind of values that they're celebrating in a way, or their interest in, this kind of conversations that are being brought up by a particular exhibition. So at these events, there's a lot of congratulatory activities. There's a lot of recognition, a lot of praise is lavished, and, and thoughtful insight is produced, on the cuff. And there's a lot of appreciation that's presented to close friends, by family members, and even by strangers, right? When you get confronted in that way by someone who's not that familiar with you, but says, I really liked what you did here. It was very interesting. It made me think of X, Y, and Z. These are very important parts, I think, too, of the exhibition that could be easily, not easily maybe replicated in a digital platform unless they're kind of forefronted in some kind of way. I have a couple more minutes, so I wanted to just walk through some alternative and current approaches to virtual modes of exhibition. And here I have in the image side, there's a work by Yoko Ono, who is a kind of conceptual fluxus artist. And in a way, their conceptual art is the original OG of virtual exhibitions, because their idea in a lot of ways was that an idea is art. So it just is in your head. There is no thing. Of course, they got a lot of these ideas from other places too, even though we might think of it as a kind of European idea, conceptual art, the dematerialization of the art object. These are kind of ideas that were also learned from like the global South, for example, in Latin America, through contemporary artists exchanging ideas with artists in Latin America. So here you have a conversation piece, which is a text, which is a poem, but it's also an idea. And once you read it, it happens in your head, what this little work of art. And so I think that that's kind of important to think about and to engage. So The first one I'll talk about just briefly is the terrain exhibitions, art in place work that's happening right now. And so I'm going to kind of switch over to, hopefully, to the internet real fast. And you can see that the art in place, it's a call for artists to exhibit work in their location of their home. Or thereabouts. And as each of the artists present their projects in their windows in their yards, a map is produced here. And so you can see some of the work that's been made. So here's a window piece, and here's some other things, a front yard piece. This is an interesting one by Alberto Aguilar. So you click on the link, and then it tells you a little bit of more information and gives you like a little bit of detail about what is happening in the work. So this kind of map making project, this kind of like do it at home kind of project, I think works pretty well in the sense that it challenges the kind of immediate rush to digital platforms. And it challenges the kind of, I would call it, slightly misguided sense that the internet is an open, a democratic space where everyone has access to the image, to the video, etc. Because as my colleagues have already described, there are issues of access regarding, digital divides clearly, but not just the internet itself, but the devices, which are extremely, expensive and oftentimes shared, depending on the different socioeconomic classes that people are wrangled into, through racist structures of our society, right? The next project I want to talk to you about and I'll share a bunch of different links because we won't have time to go through all of these. But one thing I thought was very prescient, I would say, is that at SAIC, where I teach both undergraduate and graduate courses, which is the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which many of you are, I'm sure, are familiar with, we had an extremely challenging moment where every year, 500 plus undergrads matriculate and are part of what they would call like a thesis exhibition. And that is literally like, 200-300 artists all showing work out in one gigantic space, the Sullivan Galleries, plus, 50, 60, 70 odd graduate students who are also graduating and are participating in this kind of culminating final exhibition moment. And all that was, had to end. It couldn't go forward. And there was a lot of talk about postponement, and next year we could bring them back and make an alternative exhibition, schedule. But I don't think that that's going to actually happen because the logistics would be just impossible with the way that the next year is already unfolding. So what ended up happening is the group of exhibition managers and also some kind of savvy internet folks and coders and whatnot came up with this platform to both highlight students' work or graduating students' work, but also create more content around it. So you have artists, designers, and scholars, the SAIC graduate class of 2020. And you begin here with a little explanation of like what this is. But every day, and this has already changed, and you can see there's a gallery here, every day they have commissioned a local or non-local artists to select 3 or 4 of the profiles that are presented here, which I'll walk you through those, to create a little bit to organize the exhibition because it's like so many people, but every day on the splash page, they'll have 3 that are highlighted through a curatorial process, which they call Eyes On. And so here every day throughout August, an invited arts professional selects 3 graduates to highlight and to kind of showcase. And so here Danny Giles has picked these 3 artists. And so you can click on them and see their work and their artist statement and some documentation of the projects that they're worked on towards the end of their career at the school. Now, if you keep scrolling down, there is this whole display by themes. So each of the artists who would have graduated have selected 4 or 5 of these tags that if you're interested, as I am, in a way and say migration or borders or queerness or gender, you can click on these thematics, and then you'll get a host of different profiles that you can pick from and look at and kind of explore more intensely. So I'm gonna go quickly through one more thing, and that is this kind of tune-in section, in which a couple of people who are already at the school have a scheduled Zoom, unfortunately, right? Because it's the default of our our multi-person meeting platform. We'll discuss, it's a scheduled Zoom meeting where the public can join. Delinda Collier, who's the Dean of Graduate Students, and Robert Farrow, who's a curator at the Art Institute, for a lively discussion between them and, about addressing the prevailing themes and trends demonstrated in the graduate work. So in the context of contemporary art and culture. So creating that kind of, more of a context around the work, that discursive element that I mentioned. And then you have another one scheduled between Lisa Wainwright and Hamza Walker, who's a kind of well-known curator who was in Chicago for many years, but now is at LAX Art. Again, these conversations will address prevailing themes, trends demonstrated by the work and within the context of contemporary art and culture. So, and then if you go all the way to the bottom, you can just look through the names and click on them and sort of get a little bit of information about what they're working on, and video links and PDFs and whatnot, all of these types of things. So I have maybe just a minute or two, and I'll just kind of share just some other resources, like Self-Maintenance Resource Center, which is organized by the Luminary. It's a new curatorial project that responds to, responds to our moment of kind of distancing. And it's an online project that supports the perspectives of a variety of artists for 20 weeks and cycles through every week on a Tuesday evening. And the content is created by artists, not just to display their practices, but to display their research and to display the images that they're looking at and drawing upon, and the links and the GIFs and the PDFs that are informing their practice. So you don't really get so much of an image of their work, but of their thinking. And it's a kind of, that's why it's called a resource center. And I think the self-maintenance is kind of nice too, because it's a way of sharing information. And I guess the other thing about the exhibition that I would foreground, which to me is inherent to community, is communication. Like, language is only completed in the communal experience. And so for me, art is a form of communication. Now, sometimes it's more abstract, like poetry, where you're like left scratching your chin going, I don't know what that means. Sometimes it's more direct, where like a thesis, but nevertheless, it's all like a form of communication. I'll just share this project too. That was a 48-hour screening of Love is the Message. The Message is Death by Arthur Jaffa, in which 5 or 6 different very well-known museums throughout the country, and maybe even beyond that in London, screened this video work for 48 hours. And then off-site at another location, there was a series of events that were zoomed and recorded and posted, where thinkers were gathered around the idea of this work and the material sort of part of it too, where they discussed this work. And then Press is a very important kind of interdisciplinary publishing initiative that is also a curatorial project, but is also is a creative practice project. And in that, there's a lot of linkages between what the asteroid strikes, whatever I forgot the name of that I know who they are, but that kind of thing where there's a lot of links to PDFs that can be printed out and displayed and shared, and there's a kind of free open communication of the PDF being platformed here. And then there's more complicated ones like forensic architecture, which I don't think we'll go into at all. And then there's this kind of No Wave, which is a radio station, but also a research project that presents what they call reviews, which are histories, memoirs, and archives about specific musicians who have like devoted but relatively underground followings, like Katie Red from the New Orleans bounce tradition. And I might show that one just for a second, and then I'll kind of end my in my discussion. But there's a kind of interesting way that there's like new writing produced with shared archival images, with quotes from interviews, and also with links to music and so forth, and like ephemera, all linked up together to tell the story of Katie Red, who's like an important musician, cultural figure, icon, and in the trans Black community of New Orleans, but also went beyond that, right? So this kind of narrative storytelling element, I think, is kind of, and here's a little information about Katrina, right? So the way that the context is built in this one, to me, is quite useful, maybe. Maybe one last thing would be quarantine times, which was which was produced by a board of editors working in different disciplines that commissioned different creative responses from the Chicago community about quarantine. And every day a post was made that was a commissioned response. And now it's a gigantic archive, essentially, of the creative community of Chicago's response to, and an ongoing, and a kind of like reportage way or a journalistic way every day, like the New York Times comes every day, right? In this way, every day artists were responding to the new developments of the quarantine, which of course included the rebellion and the revolution and the rise of the Black Lives Matter, and also, defund the police movement that came on the heels of yet another slaying of a Black man by the police. So it kind of follows this arc and this trajectory in a way. Now, with that, I will kind of stop sharing my screen and conclude my comments by thanking all my colleagues and thanking Mark, and thank you all for patiently listening, and hopefully it can be some use to you, and I'm excited to move forward with you as we work together to help create a celebratory, culminatory, communicative, and accessible kind of experience for all the people who were participating in these projects, So, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks again, Gee and Lauren and Kate, for bringing us together. Those were really informative. We're gonna open it up to discussion, but let's just, Brandon, can you just show the 3 or 4 platforms that we had discussed with the group beforehand, just to give everyone a refresher? But definitely, we have more to think about doing an online presentation or online exhibition. What does that mean? I think, Gee, your ideas around like presence and non-presence are really we really need to think about, like, what is it that we're, how are the artists and the teachers and the students represent themselves in these spaces, right? I think that's something like really worth thinking about. But Brandon, can you show? Oh, I'm sorry. I need to share my screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Is my webpage visible? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. So back in, I believe, April, we were gave a preview at what we were potentially thinking of and what other platforms we've noticed that have potential, and things that we've tested a little bit and tried out. There's 4 of them. This first one being Arena, which I've used in the past to compile research and documents and resources. Some institutions have used it before to compile resources or structure classes they might have. My example I made in April isn't quite working, but A similar sort of idea was for one of our in-school programs that works with the Park Forest School District in Illinois. We were sort of compiling a list of, like a curated list of artists relevant to STEAM, so like science, technology, engineering, art, and math, their STEM curriculum, and sort of how teachers and artists and even students could potentially find something or find someone and somebody's body of work that sort of fits into what may be relevant to what they're learning. So this is a pretty, pretty unelegant list, in that at the beginning we have these 4 different containers that have different subjects, like the science, technology, engineering, clicked on it nicely, the math and systems, in addition to some other different subjects that might fit into it to expand on something that's not just as plain as like math or just engineering. So if you just kind of scroll down, it's a bit of an endless scroll of just different artists and different thumbnails showing either a select piece or just an image that was automatically taken from an artist's personal website or from a gallery that represents them. It also supports videos and pretty easy like embedding with videos and being able to just quickly take on and absorb it. So that's the arena. As Gee was talking about, sort of the commercial endeavors and how some websites are taking a more referential takes. We found a platform called Art Steps that does the same thing, as emulating a physical gallery space. It even gives you a nice little door you can open. But using sort of images taken from past project from the Daily School, I think they did regarding bees and like the honeycomb structure. You can sort of bring in the images, create them on the wall, move around the space. You can click on the images and select them, and then it'll usually reveal didactic text. But I didn't quite fill in the didactic text. Supports 3D and a video. It's pretty nice. Sorry, going on. As mentioned, and kind of in reference to those initial set of questions we were talking about, and all of the people in the AR Partners Program are familiar with, is the bulb. This is taken from a bulb PD. I didn't quite fill it out with the same things, but sort of following that sort of blog-like structure, not quite as dynamic or as colorful as the No Wave platform that Joshua was showing, but still gets the same sort of format of just like creating the narrative and following it from a top to a bottom. And closing off is another idea, is using a Tumblr page for it. This is our Cape Network forum that we've been pushing. We're still creating content for to show off different dialogues we've done, different interviews and conversations we've had in the past, and being able to just do something similar or following this format or a different format that is available to us that we can find for Tumblr is another option that we can use for Exhibit. And obviously we're not just limited to these 4 platforms. There's obviously, as we've moved to this digital space, there's probably hundreds, if not like thousands of different platforms that we can use, and we can all experiment and we can explore and try out. And obviously there's even analog options that we haven't seriously imagined or considered yet, really. So we have many of options, and we have this month of August, and anyone who decides to continue on helping investigate and experiment with Convergence as we move to a remote setting, we have more than enough time and resources to explore.
Thank you, Brandon. Now I'm going to, how about open it up to questions, kind of like wrapping our heads around also around how a virtual gallery could kind of exceed the bounds of the projects that we have. And I think Lauren also brought up some interesting ideas of bringing the digital and analog together, and kind of thinking about a way that we could develop like with a virtual exhibit, like how we could kind of develop like this dynamic between didactics and video as functioning as kind of like propelling that dialogue with the audience. And then of course the ways in which kind of Josh kind of talked about how, like, even brought up at SAIC's thesis exhibit that there were curators curating the students' work. And then there was also another section that one was able to self-curate the work, right? And then public programs existing there as well. And overall, like everyone kind of really addressed this notion of access. You know, there is this kind of techno-utopia out there that we can be online and share and have access to it. But the reality is that not a lot of, we're still hands-on, right? That's kind of our default. And that a lot of the students and families and communities we work with don't necessarily have access to those platforms and devices. So any questions first for Gee, Lauren, Josh?
One thing I might add is that I know that y'all already use digital platforms in a variety of ways, but I guess I keep thinking too, like, is it only one solution for every project? Is it only one platform that everything has to fit within? Or is that too much? Or does it create confusion, though, on the other hand, to say draw from a whole menu and pick in more of a kind of customizable approach, which has its own problems, clearly. But I guess that's something that I thought of immediately as Brandon was sharing out some things, and also when Lauren and Gee were presenting too.
Right, definitely. I think like originally we were thinking like one platform, but within our conversations and more like when I was looking at all the presentations, definitely I started to think about like going back, kind of thinking more like locality, like what makes sense for a project, and how and what different platforms could kind of enhance those projects. Different approaches could actually, and also different approaches, not necessarily like completely digital, can enhance a certain project. And the question is, how do we kind of combine them? I see Michelle, Sarah posted in the chat. And Josh responded. So yeah, I could see individual projects being displayed at school or a more local space, and having QR codes that link to online exhibits. I think I was drawn to exhibits that incorporate aspects of in-person and online, yes. And Josh agrees. Yeah. Michelle's from Murphy School. Murphy School also has a piece, an outdoor installation of ceramics by students in the terrain exhibit that Josh covered. Any other responses? or questions, responses, more ideas? Oh, a question about didactics from Anansi. Question about didactics presented as an intentional video. Student contributors making a specific video addressing audiences directly in the way that wall text or title cards would work. I think this is, you know, we're always interested in figuring out how to bring the student's voice into the exhibits. So yes, I could see us looking into recording students' voices to describe their works. I know that even within some of the research that we are doing with our research team, that we are doing interviews with students. So perhaps there were, because a lot of the work has taken place already. It's completed. All the work is completed, but maybe like maybe teachers and artists had done interviews with students or recorded their classrooms, and those could function as interpretive text or videos for the pieces. So certainly those are things that we could look into, or even like think about like how could we make them. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question, or should I use the chat, or should I just talk? Okay, I'm just going to talk. Is there a liability with students like using their voices, or if there's like a program and then they're seen on screen? Because as I was like developing my presentation, that kept coming up of like it's a very different liability maybe for a museum when you've like opted in and your parent is like dropping you off to do this program or something versus like being a school participant. So I didn't know if that changes anything.
Yeah, there is. So we do have all of the classes. All of the student participants need to have a audio-visual release form, right? So we can use their image in our in any kind of like documentation that we have. But we are kind of careful to select those when we put them online. Yeah, so if we were to go to the route of recording studios, recording students, and be placed on these websites, we would need to, I guess, make sure that we have the appropriate forms for each and releases, or maybe we can just use voices. Here's one from Betsy. I'm really interested in how we can make some of these structures work for non-literate groups. I worked with elementary kids. Elementary kids, part of their accessibility is respecting that they are learning to read. Also really curious about in-home ties, and that gets us off our screens.
Maybe one thing I might add here is that what Lauren represented with Tiger versus Asteroid, that there could be an element to the exhibition that is, well, in the exhibition world, they would call it a takeaway, something you receive and you get to like take home with you, like a poster or whatever. But there's no set idea about what that needs to be, you know, like it could be, it's always like a thing you pin on the wall, but it could be like something you cut out or build, or, you know, I've seen some things like that, something you know, add to like a sort of placemat at a restaurant that has like, you know, a coloring book to it, you know, or something like that. I'm just thinking like the exhibitions could also come with some element that is, if printing is possible, or maybe some instructions for how to make something or kind of build something along the lines of what the work is about, or, you know what I mean, to facilitate that workshop moment of producing something that is less about looking at a screen and more maybe about cutting up paper or building motor skills or kind of lining things up, or, you know, making decisions about materials and space and your relationship to them. Yeah.
see heads nodding, so I think they're in agreement, Josh. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. And we have like a wealth of information from these guys. It is recorded, so I'm gonna also ask for the curators if they could share their presentations with me, if they haven't already. What I'd like to do now, I have a feeling that there's gonna be more discussion after this, and probably at the next PD on the 13th. What I would like to do now is, for all the teachers and teaching artists, could you use the, do you know how to use your raise hand feature, the hand raising feature? Could you raise your hand if you will participate in both of these PDs, so you'll attend the next PD and take part in the curatorial team that will create these exhibits. So that will entail doing mock-up exhibits on some of these platforms that we showed you, and to do them by next week, right? You will also need to review some of the bulk pages and kind of select a few things just for a trial and to assemble like a mini mock-up and see what that's like. We'd probably ask you to work in groups, sorry. Attend that meeting, decide as a group which platforms make most sense, right? We're also gonna work with these groups to identify the actual themes and groups for those themes. And then in August and September, those groups will create these online exhibits. So could you, and there is a small stipend for that, but we do need to know right now if you are interested in taking part in this endeavor, because it is, after all, your exhibit. And then we can figure out how Josh and Gee and Lauren could help guide that process. Could you please raise your hand so we know who would like to do this?
I'm just like a little concerned about timeline because all of our ARP proposals are done.
I know.
And I think I'm the only one who waited to start them because life was crazy.
Yeah, Betsy, I understand. Life is crazy. So that's why we're asking now. So I understand if you don't have time, then you don't have time. So we're asking people for time. And we don't know exactly what the timeline will look like. So that's why we need to assemble these groups to figure that out. So if you're interested, please raise your hand. So I have Dwayne and I have Jessica. So just two? Oh,
Mark, you're talking about the raise hand feature, right? Like when you click the participants button at the bottom and then you click on the right, the raise hand button. Is that what you?
I'm looking at. So you should have like a blue hand up.
So yeah, you click on participants and then at the, is it not chat, but participants? And then there's like, I'm going to raise my hand just for fun.
Same.
All right. Done.
That's better. That's better. Jessica, Dwayne. Jessica.
My blue hand isn't showing.
Oh, Andre. Okay, Andre, I got you. That's good enough for me. Michael Lopez, Laura Smith. We have Anansi, Gina, Betsy, Jessica, and Dwayne. That's a good team. Okay. So, Brandon, can you record that?
I just wrote it down in pen and paper. Yeah, I think I have everyone: Laura Smith, Betsy, Dwayne, Jessica, Michael, Anansi, Gina, and Andre.
Fantastic.
But that's everyone, I think.
So what we'll do is for those groups, we will, let's see. How about I'll send you all a email, and we'll decide on the working group tasks there, because we are running out of time. And then I'll be meeting with the curators tomorrow for a follow-up meeting, and then I'll continue that discussion with them about like how we're gonna pair up. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, how about, yeah, so I will, any other kind of questions or comments now? Yeah. And of course, if you're still interested in attending the next PD, on August 13th, please attend, because we're always, we just need everyone's ideas and suggestions. Those are always helpful. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you all, and I will be in touch with the team.
Bye, all.